So Nathan Oakley joined us. You want to go ahead and say what you were saying? You don't have to say any more than you care to. You can introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Nathan Oakley. How are you doing?
Great.
Hi, Nathan.
Hi, Nathan.
I don't know what you want me to talk about.
Oh, well, you were talking about this electrical stuff, and I'm curious. You seem like you know what you're talking about, and I don't understand. So,
Oh, okay. Oh, that's
yeah,
easy enough then. I thought you were questioning my views on religion or something.
No,
Fine.
no.
That's cool. I'm used to being asked far more precarious questions. Okay, you guys have like half the frequency that we do in terms of mains, and your standards of mains are just, I won't swear, are very poor. So you get what we would call dirty mains. The mains is far more susceptible to interference crossing into it. So the only way I can describe this is if you imagine what a wave looks like, literally a wave going up and down, like a musical note going up and down. Well, if you imagine that wave being really clean, so like it's, if you drew it perfectly, that would be a clean wave. Well, if you distort that wave, so you like make it jagged, I'll turn my camera on and I'll try and actually show you what I mean, because it's hard to explain. There we go. Can you guys see me? Hold on, I'll just turn the light on. That's better. Okay, so if you imagine a wave like this, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, imagine it being jaggedy like that. Do you understand? So instead of just a clean, nice wave, you have a wave that goes like this, that's jagged. Well, that would be a dirty wave. And what you have in the States is lots and lots of dirty mains. And things like your laptop have got high frequency power supplies that are far more susceptible to shitty mains. They're supposed to clear it all up. But in my experience, when I was traveling all over the world, where I'd have the most problems with my laptop would be in places that had shitty mains, excuse my French, but poor quality mains. And you guys, you've just got terrible mains. And the way it's wired is awful. You guys should be ashamed. Anyway, there you go. That's it.
That's awesome.
But what caught me here, just before I don't mean to tie up your show, I'm really sorry. But
No,
what actually
awesome.
attracted me to the show was the title. So you're like, why are we here? That's a pretty big question.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm a flat earther, or I call myself a further. That's my new term. And so I recognized your name, and I was like, oh wow, let's see what he has to say about this. I'm sharing you, so let me turn that off real quick, if it'll cooperate. I have a problem with presenting people when they don't want to be presented. Okay.
But that's why I joined. I've got a real bee in my bonnet for this particular question, because a lot of flat earthers will make this statement, which is that the creator is a self-evident truth. And I would say that's just not the case. It's apparent to me when I look at a tree that it's come from an acorn, in case of an oak tree. But you can say I've been created from my mother and father, and I can follow that back and back and back and back. So you eventually end up at the question, which came first, chicken or egg? Well, just because we have no other answer than to say, well, we don't know, therefore it must be created, to me is a non sequitur conclusion. It's a logical fallacy to assume that just because we don't know how the first egg or the first chicken came to be, that it was therefore created. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I'm loving what you're saying. I'm very fascinated. Yeah.
It's only because of the way he's saying it, Tony. No, I'm joking.
That's just an added bonus, but yeah, I'll take that too.
So I'm going to try to adjust these volumes because every time I hear myself, I'm too loud. But okay, so I'm hearing what you're saying, and I appreciate that you were willing to come on and to share. This is awesome. For me, I've seen something that to me is just absolutely, to anyone I share my story with, 99.99% of people will say that I'm either crazy or was on drugs or am a liar or I'm just craving attention. But I've seen something that suggests something different. And what's interesting is I saw it right about the same time I started becoming familiar with flat Earth. And it was not late at night. I wasn't on drugs. And it was something I'd actually been watching for several months. I had been watching what I believed to be aliens. They were, I live in a very remote area, and I watched these lights doing all kinds of crazy things in the middle of the night. And through the night, I would spend hours just observing, watching. At times they appeared to be like mining. I mean, like something that I could only describe as plasma being shot down at the ground. And I live in an area with a ton of basalt cliffs, and they say that in this basalt you can find platinum and gold and other precious metals. And so, I mean, I'm like, what are they doing, and how is it that they keep from starting fires? They can't be using anything hot to do this, because there's brush everywhere where I live. So anyway, watch these things for months, and then one night I was watching one of them, and I noticed a relationship between these two lights in particular. And I kept watching these lights, and it appeared that these lights were actually rotating on a single axis. And when one would go up, the other would go down. When one would go forward, the other would go around toward the back. And I mean, it was just, there was an absolute relationship. And then I saw what was uniting the lights. The lights were, I don't believe that they were emitting light. It could have been reflecting light. Whatever it was, those lights were like plates, like armor plates on shoulders. I saw this hugely muscular body, huge. I'm talking like this thing. You would measure him in yards instead of feet. He was big. Or meters. So I actually saw the detail of this thing's neck, its shoulders, its arms, its torso down to like midway. This thing literally, I mean, you might say I'm just a total idiot, but this thing was wearing a what appeared to be like a leather and metal ringed harness. And this leather and metal ring harness, it had 2 straps coming down the front of its body. It had 3 straps coming around the middle of its torso. And it had 6 rings, 3 on each side vertically. And it also, I watched it. It was like it was bored. It couldn't go anywhere maybe. I don't know. It wasn't, but it was stretching. I watched it. As I was watching it twice, it stretched its arms out fully vertically with its hands fisted, huge arms, okay? And behind these arms, each time these arms stretched out, a huge set of black bat-like wings stretched out behind it, the arms, okay? And I say bat-like because these things were like, I could see the delicate nature of the membrane of the wing. Okay, so like, it's really hard for me to, I don't know. Let me just leave it at that story. And if you don't believe me, you're not special, but maybe you could pretend you believe me and then try to explain that. Like if just like accept that what I'm saying is true just for a moment. I would appreciate it if you could. Maybe it's not possible, but if you could.
But even if it is possible, I mean, it may very well be. I mean, what sort of scale are you talking? You said you started off and I had a picture of like a binary star in the sky that was teeny tiny.
Oh no, mine was on the ground.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't in the air; it was on the ground, and it was like. Now, considering all the detail I just told you about, and then I'll tell you it was about 1/4 to half a mile away from my window.
Okay, cool.
Pretty far out though, eh?
Yeah, very.
So actually seeing that, and something that I could only call a demonic entity. It wasn't anything that I wanted to put my slippers on and run out and say hi to. What's interesting is that just days before that, I had decided to communicate with these things. I was going to communicate with them with lights, because they, lights is pretty much their game. And so I thought that I could communicate with them. Well, before I had a chance to communicate with them, I saw what they actually looked like. Prior to that, I had actually left cameras out overnight trying to film them, but the light that they emit, if they do not emit light, whatever they reflect is not bright enough at that distance for any of my cameras to get. I'm not a professional photographer, so if there's a way to do it, I don't know it. I tried. But I mean, that's pretty far out. So for me, I was an atheist for most of my life, most of my adult life, absolutely, 100%. And so I can appreciate.
It's a really cool story, and I don't disbelieve you. I mean, maybe you won't believe me when I say this, but I've heard far weirder stuff than that. That's not particularly weird for me. But there we go. It's a very cool story, but I wouldn't ever attribute that to there being a creator in any way, shape, or form. Let
me show you a cool trick here, sis. I got my smartphone here. Here's a remote control. Well, actually, since you're looking at it through a camera, you'll probably be able to see the infrared light. Yep, there it is. Now, you look at it with your eye, you can't see it. But you can also do it with your smartphone, maybe. Wow, you see how bright it is? That's infrared light.
Why didn't I think of that? Thank you. That's so right in front of me the whole time. I should have figured that out.
Yeah, that's what I used to sell hi-fi. That's why I knew about dirty mains, and that's what we used to do to test the batteries and the remotes. Just point them at the CCTV.
I was a welder. I know a little bit about electricity.
Man, I was trying to figure out what that had to do with the demon I saw.
Well, you're talking about the emission of light, and your camera, if it had been infrared, visual, or or white light, your camera would have picked it up. Only thing your camera probably won't pick up would be ultraviolet, but you wouldn't see that.
And I was going to say, if you put it in this terms, Robin, the videos I put out, I have to use a variety of filters and different techniques to capture those lights. So it might be the same thing with what you were saying. I know I've tried to capture some stuff in the sky and I've not been able to either, but it might be he's right about using an infrared or a different filter that might actually show up better. It's just a thought.
Yeah. Well,
if you want to be astounded, just get, if you know anybody that's got night vision goggles, just borrow them for a night and look up. It's amazing what you'll see. And further to that, if you're in anywhere that's in very low light pollution, so my folks used to live in a part of the UK that had extremely low, or the lowest light pollution in this part of the world, and you could look up at the night sky, and over time, I mean, they had a hot tub, it was wicked. You could turn the lights off in it and sit in the warm hot tub and just watch the stars. And I've said this loads of times, but once your eyes have adjusted over a course of, I don't know, say 10 minutes, the stars look like you can literally pluck them out of the air. They don't look like they're, I mean, as some of you said you're a flat earther, I don't know who said that, but, we know they're not as flat earthers, we know they're not the ridiculous distances we're told in the heliocentric model. But further to that, when you literally sat there looking at them, just observing them with your own two eyes, they look like you could literally pluck one out of the air. It's amazing. And you see so much just with your own eyes, so long as it's dark enough. As soon as you turn on street light, it just ruins it.
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering, could I ask a question with our new guest? I'm sorry, I missed your name off the bat. I'm terrible with names.
Nathan.
Say hi, Nathan. It sounds like you're very knowledgeable as far as electricity and energy goes. Do you have a thought process as to why RH negatives seem to conduct electricity a little bit different? Is that what you were saying earlier, or is that just in response to the way the USA handles electricity?
No, I mean, my knowledge is only audio related. All I used to do as a rep was travel around the world selling electronics to studios. And one of the things that used to plague some of the countries I was in was the mains, because it was just such poor quality. And you're talking about sort of picking up light waves on cameras, and with electricity, it's a similar sort of principle. So to get that dirty mains, you literally, how can I explain this better? The mains that's traveling along your wires is traveling at a frequency that's literally audible. So it's traveling at 50 hertz. I think that's right in the States. And you can hear that. Well, literally, it's not like this, but in a way of describing it, you could almost put your head next to the mains wires and hear them. You know, you could hear that 50 hertz buzz as well within range. Does that make sense? I hope I've explained that clearly enough. But yeah, if you've got something that you can hear and you've got an amplifier predominantly change that type of power from this down as best I can into a power that can make a speaker move in and out, you can literally pick up the interference on the mains. The dirtiness of it can be heard in a very literal way, in the same way as if you've got an amplifier, any amplifier, and you just stick your head next to it, you'll hear the transformer buzzing, and it's buzzing at the mains frequency, usually about 50 or 60 hertz. You can literally hear it going bzzz, a very deep hum. Well, the more crap you have on the mains, the worse the audio performance is, which was the thing I was focused on. So no, I don't know how RH negative blood would be more or less conductive. That's certainly not within my realm.
Yeah. I was just wondering if, because you seem so, I was like, well, maybe I've been told it's because we have a different copper content in our blood. But I know where I live in particular, I have those giant towers that crackle, like you can hear them. They look like giant, sentries or robots or something, but they're all over my hill, and you can just hear that crackle of the stuff when you go up. And I know that I have a huge amount of issues with electricity up where I am. I'm just fascinated by what you were saying, though.
Yeah, crappy mains. It's poisonous stuff. It's not good for you. Being around those towers, it's just not good. But I mean, the only thing in conspiracy theories about RH negative stuff is not some of the Christian channels, and they link it to the Nephilim, the sort of descendant line, people who are the fallen angels and things of that nature. That's the only thing I know about it, as opposed to its conductive properties.
Yeah, I know. Just for me, and I've talked to other RH negatives, I know I have a weird thing with electricity. Yeah, I will pop light bulbs when I walk in a room. So it's more so when I'm upset. Blow circuits. 3 vacuums in a day. One was a brand new one. It's just a lot of us seem to have that kind of thing. I notice when I am in town at my house where these giant towers are with the electricity, it's much, much worse versus when I go out to the country to my boyfriend's house where there's no Wi-Fi, there's none of that stuff. Yeah, it seems like it's I don't know, not as much interference, or I'm not sure how to describe that, but not as intense.
I can make a connection with my very limited knowledge to sort of join the two dots together. I mean, I'm sure if there was a physicist watching this, they'd be cringing right now. But, as a person, you're literally emitting energy all the time. You can look at a thermal camera and see this visually, that you're literally giving off various different wavelengths of light. And as I've just said, that you can literally interfere with the mains with various other electrical interferences. Well, you as a person are giving off lots of energy. There's nothing in my mind that would preclude the two being not being mutually exclusive. So therefore, yeah, it makes total sense that you could absolutely interfere with mains. Further to that, I've seen it dozens of times. There are certain people that I've come across. Unfortunately for me, my wife's one of them. She just makes mains do weird things. There's no other way to describe it. I've met several other people throughout my career when I was traveling around that did the same thing. Being around them just meant that stuff broke. They weren't good people to know.
Exactly, right? My mom's like, don't touch my vacuum cleaners ever again. Yeah, exactly.
Do you know your wife's garbage type? I'm sorry.
What?
Do you know your wife's blood type, Nathan?
I don't. I'm sorry.
Oh, it would be interesting to know, because I don't know how much you know about, just that little bit, like you said, the conspiracy theories. Most of us don't really subscribe to those, but it would be interesting. Do you and your wife have children?
We do. We have one daughter.
Yeah. Well, I only ask because usually if a woman has a child, she usually, not always, but she's informed that she is Rh negative if she is blah blah blah.
Maybe she was.
That's when I found out. Yeah, is when I was pregnant. Exactly.
So it's interesting stuff for sure.
We should talk more about that, and you should invite Thunderfoot to the next live stream here. His name is Phil Mason. He's a physicist, chemist, and nuclear physicist.
I need to talk to him.
He's a big YouTuber. You can go to his channel. He does all kinds of great experiments, and he's extremely knowledgeable, PhD. So
that's the person I've been looking for. I put my YouTube channels out with my puzzle piece that I'm bringing forward with in hopes that I could hook up with a scientist to study what I'm trying to bring out further. That would be great for me. I'd love to pick his brain. I'd love that.
Well, I kind of feel like what do you think as far as, let's skip the Rh negative part. Where are we from and what is our purpose? What do you think? Can I, if you don't mind answering, even though this isn't really a flat earth forum, what does that mean for you, Nathan?
The question, where are we from?
Yeah.
Well, as I said earlier, it has no answer. You know, there's plenty. That's what I said in my opening gambit in your chat room, was to say that you know, I've got a stack of science textbooks and even religious texts that can give anybody an answer to that question, but it's all based on belief.
Right.
So nobody has an answer to this. It's a philosophical question that a lot of the control structures we are living under are based around. It's an amazing question. That's what attracted me to the show, because it is it's one of the most amazing questions you can ask.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't suggest that I have all the answers for sure. I think I may be the only flat earther in here, but what do you believe there's a dome?
No, I've seen no evidence to that effect.
No reason to believe that. But you don't believe that we're on a disk being thrusted through space in order to create gravity, right?
No, that's I mean, that meme is a perpetuation that's put forward by the Flat Earth Society, and I don't know, you said there's no other flat earther on the panel, but this might get boring. What we would call the flat earth controlled.
I'm a believer.
Oh, cool. Yeah, the flat earth controlled opposition, i.e. the bit that's basically paid for by the government and reaches all the top of the search engines, is the Flat Earth Society. And like any good controlled opposition, they do have quite a lot of truth on the Flat Earth Society website. You know, for a start, they're saying the Earth is flat, and I would absolutely concur. However, they do put out some rather crazy notions, like the Earth rising at 8 meters per second, and that giving you gravity, and things like water spilling off the edge of this disk. The reason they perpetuate these memes is because they need to keep the illusion of infinite space. So even if you're led down the path of, you know, the Earth actually being flat, which it observably is, you are also left with the notion that you are in this vast area of space. And what we on the ground, literally us, everyone on this panel, experience on a day-to-day basis, the girl who says she was a flat earth has got this in her avatar, is, you know, solid ground beneath us and the sky above us. That is what we experience. You know, we don't experience space underneath with Australians hanging off the bottom of the ball. That's not a perspective any of us can ever have. You know, that's an impossible perspective that we're just given by, you know, other government agents like NASA and SpaceX and various other people. But yeah, you know, from our perspective here on the ground, we just have the sky above us and the ground beneath us. We don't have this infinite space for a disk that the Flat Earth Society say raises up at, I think it's 8 meters per second, to give us gravity. And the reason they do it is because gravity in and of itself is a necessity of a spinning ball flying through space. That's the only need for gravity. You know, the principles of buoyancy and density explain sufficiently why why when Neil deGrasse Tyson drops the mic and says this is gravity, well, no, that is density. The mic is more dense than the air it passes through. If people are to ask me a more complex question in terms of what defines up and down, you know, I only have the anecdotal evidence presented to me by the flat earthers and the obvious fact that we do have magnetic fields on Earth. So those two things in combination seem to be a logical explanation for what defines up from down. But there is no need for what they describe, they being whoever you want to call they. I won't go into that bit, but they describe gravity as a necessity to keep things to a spinning ball, which should be throwing things off it. You know, that's all gravity is, a mathematical equation to square all the circles. And it's a beautiful equation. It's a magical equation. One of the flat earther called Brian Mullen broke down gravity in about a half-hour video, explaining how it balances everything in the observable world with this maths equation that, you know, essentially defines how we are physically sticking to a spinning ball, which is wonderful, other than, you know, the actual proof of it. Recently went to a science museum, and NASA-esque museum in Britain. You know, it's got our moon rock here, our fake moon rock, our petrified wood, and their proof of gravity there was some bean cans on a plastic display table saying, you know, this is how much the bean can weighs on Mars, and this is how much it weighs on the sun, and so on and so forth. You know, that was their proof. And going back in history, the proof of it was Cavendish, you know, things of that nature. Just horseshit. You know, Cavendish balls in a shed observed with a telescope at massive distances, showing that objects of mass attract to one another. Well, it's total and utter nonsense. You know, objects of mass do not attract to one another, and water does not stick to the surface of spinning balls. But, you know, this maths equation tells us that it does, and everyone just buys it. And, you know, good for them. Wasn't here to challenge that. You know, I thought you were all Christians and creationists, and I was going to troll your chat with stuff about God.
Oh, hell no.
Oh. Wow. Well, I really appreciate what you shared. That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Even
I was going to say, if I'm quiet, it means I'm really fascinated. So yeah, I'm loving this.
Nathan, the whole chat went really quiet. Everyone's interested. So if you want to talk more about flat Earth, I'm interested.
There's only one thing to know. I mean, this is a simple statement that you can say to anybody who tells you live on a spinning ball, and that is, there is no observable curvature. That's it. That's the simple, fundamental premise of flat Earth, and anybody can observe this. So if you are to ignore all of the propaganda that we are fed, I mean, I've just literally cancelled TV of all descriptions, including the government-based TV license that we are mandated to pay here in the UK. I'm going to cancel that in the next couple of days, see how that goes. They want us to have TV. They want us to be forced the propaganda of the spinning ball. But, you know, that once you ignore that, you can actually go out into the real world and observe your surroundings. And you've got to, again, go back to the photograph avatar that we've got from me in the bottom left-hand corner. We've got a picture of a lake. Well, water's a handy medium because we know the physics of water. It's observably flat and maintains its level. So there's a quite a famous picture in flat Earth out there of all these different flask sizes all strung together, this glass string of different shapes and sizes. You pour water into it and they all come to the same level because that's the physics of water. It maintains its level. And at rest, it's perfectly flat. Now, obviously with lakes and the sea, they aren't perfectly at rest. But essentially, they're a massive body of water that you can observe things at distance that simply shouldn't be there. That the maths that they tell us in the heliocentric model that is our globe Earth or your globe Earth, but whoever's on the panel that lives on a spinning ball, good for you. You know, in their maths that they define this with, they tell us that things should disappear behind the curve of the Earth. And the simple fact of the matter is things do not disappear behind the curve of the Earth. You know, the argument gets more complicated because as you observe things very low to the ground, you have atmospheric distortions, refractions, things inverting, things that get defined by, again, they, in false terms. Mirages, for example, is one that comes up quite frequently. But these are just observations that are being distorted because you're making the observation very, very low to the ground. And this can also be replicated in a small scale. This is a new turn of events. Someone I interviewed a couple of days ago. Unfortunately, the video was removed, which is another issue I won't go into. But I'll interview him again, hopefully this Sunday. I'll use this as a plug positive. Yeah, I'll interview this guy on Sunday, Good Times for All, who's taken his camera down a very, very long, hundreds of feet warehouse, and with his camera an inch off the ground, managed to replicate in the small scale all the things we see, including things like the sun setting. So all he's doing is moving his camera further and further away from a torch, for example, a flashlight for you guys, and he's making this torch set on a flat plane like the sunsets, you know, bottom first, all the things you observe in reality. And these are small scale tests that cost nothing. The counter arguments, so as a flat earther, we get into some pretty heavy discussions, most of which are sky based. You know, this item in the sky proves we're on a ball. That's usually the rhetoric of heliocentric believers. You know, when you get into these arguments with them, you're arguing about something that you're not physically observing on the ground. You're saying the celestial pole star in the south, which spins around Sigma Octantis, proves we're on a spinning ball. Just need to go down to the south of the equator, do a time lapse, feed it into a computer, process that image out into a circle. You can see that the stars are rotating around a central point. Therefore, you're on a ball. And for me, that's a bit of a stretch, you know, when all the other evidence on the ground doesn't stack up. You know, there is no curve. What we observe, and indeed what they build, all of the people who are out there building on our flat plane, they all say it as well. So the planar surveyors of this world will be very quick to admit that the areas that they survey, the rules they abide by, are that they are dealing with a flat plane. It's as simple as that. You know, they will say in a tricky way, they will say that the curvature is so nominal that they don't account for it, which is another way of saying they're working with a flat plane. But this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with a deception. So that sort of tricky phrasing from someone like a planar surveyor, they're not taught to account for curvature because they don't need to. There is no curvature. But when they would if they were put to task to explain it, they would say, no, we just don't account for the nominal curvature because it doesn't affect us on this at such a large scale that it never ever affects us. But yet we have people like B.O.B., the rapper, who's taking photographs of much wider distances than they're actually building, i.e. two cities opposite each other, and saying there should be X amount of curve, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, between these two cities. Where is it? You know, clearly isn't there. And the reason is pretty simple, because there isn't any curve. So there we go. That's the only thing to sum up. You like, tell me more about flat Earth. Well, there is no curvature. It's as simple as that. Anybody who tells you that there is curvature, well, they're either NASA, because they're saying they can get to the heights that they can observe curvature, because again, it's part of their rhetoric, the heliocentric rhetoric, that we as mortal men cannot get high enough to observe any curvature, which is the first paradox you come to in flat Earth. They tell us in the heliocentric model that if you were to go to a lake and watch a boat disappear from your view, you would see it go away and go over the curvature. You'd see it disappear bottom first. However, they also simultaneously tell you that if you rise up in a plane to 30,000 feet, you can't see the curvature. You're not high enough. You'd need to go up to the heights that NASA get up to in order to be able to see the actual curve of Earth. So this is a paradox that we like to shove in the face of heliocentric believers, knowing full well that, you know, you can just go out tomorrow and observe there's no curve. But this is part of the cognitive dissonance that we are all programmed with, based on the fact that every waking moment of every person's life who lives in the Western world, you are absolutely bombarded both subliminally and liminally, is that the right word, with globes. You know, on every single level. It doesn't matter what you look at and which direction. It doesn't matter what advertising board, billboard, television program, song, radio. It doesn't matter. Every single format, and it's all the same. It's all Uncle Sam. It's all Big Brother. They're all putting globes your way and telling you continually that you're on a globe in the global media. There you go. There's my rant over.
That's awesome. Are there any questions?
Yeah. How many people watched the SpaceX launch yesterday live?
I don't watch TV no more.
It was on YouTube. It was the Falcon 9 launch. They put up a geosynchronous satellite.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a live video of the rocket from the launch pad to space. You know, I mean,
Cool, man. You ever seen Godzilla? He's real, right? I've seen him on TV, Godzilla.
That's completely. I can look at anything that's been done in CG and tell you it's been done in CG. I can look and see the artifacts in it. I can see, it's what I do.
Sure.
You know?
I mean, there's two. This isn't my main specialist subject. So first, before I answer you, right, there's two people I'd put you to. One would be Infinite Plane Society, who goes through the esoteric meaning of this stuff and would say that it's just an obelisk going up to worship Baal. So that's IPS, Infinite Plane Society. That would be his explanation. If you want to go into the CGI element of it and the fakery element of it and how it's been composited, faked, then you go to Jeranism, who's ripping this stuff to shreds. And he's debating with a guy called Reg Rhetoric, who claims to be boots on the ground, filming it with his own equipment, full-on NASA fanboy. And they're debating it to the nth degree of detail. So, go to Jeranism's channel and watch him rip SpaceX a new asshole, which he does on a daily basis. As I say, it's not my field of expertise. What I would say to that is, regardless of what you can present to me on a TV screen from NASA or from SpaceX, I can go out tomorrow and prove to you that there's no curvature, that stuff that you're supposed to be able to see disappearing according to their own model and their own maths does not disappear. It's as simple as that, because we live on a flat plane. And, like I say, in terms of TV, I don't watch that stuff anymore. I just see it as poison. It's poisoning you. But, for all, if to anybody who says to me, I've seen NASA or SpaceX prove to me that I'm on a ball, well, good for you. That to me is just a belief system. You believe SpaceX, good for you. If you can verify it, wonderful. But you can't. It's not possible. You can't verify that. I can't verify that. So you have to take it on faith. And anything taken on faith, be it NASA or the Bible, is just that. It's a faith. It's a belief system. So, good for you. Believe in SpaceX all you like. I'm not here to tell you not to believe in them.
Awesome. I'm sorry. I go ahead.
Well, just like what you're saying on the belief system and everything. I was born in '69, so the moon thing already happened. But as I grew older, and they would talk about it and stuff, and the first time I ever seen a clip of it, I automatically said, we never went there. And everybody's like, yes we did, blah blah blah. I said, no, we did not. That's a hoax. I never believed it from a young age that we ever went to the moon. And for me, with the globe thing, I look at it this way. I know that people say, oh, around the world in 80 days and all that good stuff. But think about the flight system. If we were in the middle of wherever, and you want to go to a different country, if you can go into a circle, then it should not take 18 hours to go to Dubai. It shouldn't take. That's where I get confused, is why is it taking so long? If you can go from California, go to the east, you should be meeting up with Europe real quick, or vice versa, going around or going up around. We shouldn't be really that far away.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand,
Does that make
I
sense?
want to agree with you wholeheartedly, because it's one of the big arguments for and against flat Earth. And I did loads of international travel, so I should be on the side of flat earthers, banging the drum. But the problem with that is that we're talking about deception, and understanding a deception is the sort of first hurdle, because just realizing there's no curvature, you'll be suddenly up against lots of other people in amidst cognitive dissonance, and that wouldn't be a problem if they didn't have an answer for every single problem that you would throw up against them. On paper, like I say, it doesn't change the observable when you go out there and actually check this stuff. But there's what I, again, excuse my French, I describe as a layer of heliocentric bullshit. In other words, an obvious problem for them, no curvature, they would dress up with a refractive band of an interference layer, shall we call it, in what you're observing across a vast distance on a flat plane. Well, they've worked that, they've reversed that, reverse engineered that into the maths so that you can see this effect coming in. It's dependent on day and atmospheric conditions, as we're exposing as flat earthers with the super zoom cameras, not expensive technology and rockets. We're doing it on the cheap, just showing that it doesn't stack up what they tell us, i.e. the maths of the heliocentric model that's living on a globe 24,000 miles in circumference just simply doesn't stack up. So there we go. I can see this guy getting hot under the collar. Maybe we've triggered somebody. We shall see, hopefully.
We totally have. These are my brother and my father, and I have tried so hard to get them to just look into it. But, my father, as I was growing up, we had 2 giant telescopes, and, they were always watching, well, the whole family, of course, was always watching, what's it called on TV? PBS.
Cosmos with Carl Sagan.
Thank you, Cosmos with Carl Sagan. And my father had all the astronomy books, and so they choose science or scientism over observable and repeatable, and so I'm it's just so awesome to have you here. I'm not well spoken at all. It doesn't matter what I'm talking about. I always sound really terrible. You sound great though.
No, you don't, Robin. You're very well spoken.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, you're spot on though. It's the testable, the observable, and more importantly than anything, it's the verifiable. It's all well and good going to 2 textbooks and saying, well, this guy's done an experiment on it and that guy's experiment, let's compare. Well, no, just go out and get your hands dirty and check for yourself. And that in and of itself is very, very empowering. Suddenly feeling free to be essentially the judge of whatever you like. And I'll preface this by saying, if evidence is compelling and you can verify it, then you're a fool not to accept it. But if you're just taking what you've been told and assuming that it's correct, that's belief, that's a faith, and NASA, the globe, just the same as the cross, it's the latest incarnation, it's just the latest one world religion, belief in this spinning ball. Well, I'm not for that. And as a flat earther, that's where my journey has taken me, to a realization that I have the power of one. I have the ability to judge for myself. And I'm not here to convert anybody either. It's like, believe whatever you like. Me, I'm going to believe what I can check and what I've seen and what I've experienced firsthand. And said it a few times already, I've done a lot of travel. I've been all over the globe. And it isn't, it's just a very, very vast expanse of flatness, no matter which direction you travel. And the reason I know this, and this is before I came across Matt Powerland or Flat Earth or anything Flat Earth related, while I was doing these long haul flights, what I saw on every flight without exception was the same picture. Rows and rows and rows of people looking at this absolutely horrendous 7-inch back of a chair picture with headphones that you can hear nothing through, watching a god-awful movie that they've been provided with. Me, I was at the back of the plane, out of that one window in the emergency exit you can actually look through from more than a 2-inch angle, and looking for hours and hours at vast expanses of flat plane, and dreaming, going, I really wish, knowing full well that I couldn't see the curve, that I could never get high enough as a commercial passenger. I was always there thinking, I wish I could get higher. I want to see the curve. That was my aspiration, along with, when I first started traveling, thinking, will the journey be quicker on the way back because we're on a spinning globe, and not knowing anything about Coriolis and all the rest of it. You don't know this stuff. You become a flat earther and suddenly you're an expert in the heliocentric system. I would imagine that, and this isn't me being big-headed, that I know more about the heliocentric model than anyone on this panel, not through choice, but through being challenged non-stop by people who say, you're mad, the Earth's not flat, that's ridiculous, we figured this out centuries ago. And the people who say it's flat are Freemasonic shills that want to convince us all with this psyop that it's nonsense. It's like, oh, okay. I don't know about the history, but I've seen a lot of it, and it's flat. And you go out and measure it, and it's flat, and there is no curvature. And what else? What else is there? Well, there's water. Well, water's a big giveaway. The Earth's covered in the stuff, and it is, no matter what anybody says, obviously and observably flat. It doesn't conform to spheres. There is no experiment showing this. And if you ask anybody who's got a good understanding of the heliocentric model to demonstrate it, they say, well, the Earth demonstrates it. Nothing else is big enough to show this magnetic effect that water can be held to the bottom of this ball, and then they throw gravity at you and show you this maths equation and show you how it all works on paper. And you go, well, no, it has to have me accepting that somebody in Australia currently is standing antipode to me, upside down, with trillions upon trillions of tons of water also upside down antipode from me, all being held to this ball, stuck to it by gravity, this force, which can simultaneously be defied by a butterfly flapping its wings. So this force can hold trillions of tons of water but be defied by the flap of a butterfly's wings. It's just, no, I don't accept that. It's as simple as that. Further to that, you've got Brian Mullen, who shows you how the maths all works, how it squares all the circles, how it dots all the I's, crosses all the T's, and makes everything that is a fact, an actual scientific fact, something that you can go out and measure, the observable. He shows how it's a very clever mathematical way of balancing all of those things, balancing the observable, balancing density and buoyancy and mass. These things that we are told with the gravity equation have come from this single experiment, this Cavendish experiment. And with this single experiment, these two massive lead weights in a shed tell us everything, the mass of Jupiter, the mass of the moon, not by going, just by these two balls in the shed. They extrapolate the maths equation for gravity from that experiment. And that experiment essentially was designed to give us the mass of the Earth. So these two granite balls in a shed, showing that they are pulling towards each other by an absolutely phenomenally tiny amount, observed from huge distances away through a telescope. It's utter horseshit. That he's observing this, Cavendish is observing this experiment from massive distances, so there's no interaction of his gravitational pull with these two balls. What if a bloody rat runs through this shed? It's just nonsense. The whole story doesn't stack up. But that's proof of gravity. Today, back then, a couple of 100 years ago, the precision engineering and cost to produce that experiment would have been horrendous, way beyond someone like me if I lived in that time. Well, what do we have today to perpetuate this bullshit? Well, we have rockets, wonderful, very expensive, way beyond the cost of any mortal man. And when that gets to the point where it's absolutely debunked completely and obvious to everybody beyond me and most, almost all flat earthers, there are a couple of exceptions, I won't lie. But once that is obvious, we'll move on to the next bullshit with a huge expensive machine that none of us can replicate, which will be CERN, controlled by the Europeans. They'll say, okay, the Americans have tried to convince everybody of our reality with these rockets. They've failed miserably. They've all figured out that we're not on a ball. Let's give them all parallel universes now. They've been predictively programming us with this shit with all of the sci-fi movies we watch for a long time. CERN will come out with their dots and lines and God particles, and people will flock to it and just believe the next string of bullshit that we're fed by the government propaganda machine. NASA will fail eventually. It's starting to come apart at the seams now.
That's awesome. Anyone else have any other questions? I hate to do this to you, Nathan. It's just like, I feel like you've got a lot more knowledge than I do, and I love to, at least we're exposing flat Earth. I just told someone in the chat that we have It's funny. Atheist Rex came in to troll the channel. I told him that you came in to troll the channel before him. So you better look out. He might end up coming on. But no, so I'm glad you came in, and to me it's
Shame you haven't got a good troll. Negator X or Gem Panda or someone like that would have been better, because Atheist Rex is foul-mouthed and nasty. He's not a pleasant person. Let's put it
well,
Oh, bring him on. I like him already.
if he goes foul, then he'll have to go.
swear at you and tell you no. Well, maybe not. You know, we'll see. He believes in evolution and dinosaurs and all that nonsense. So you know, have him on. He's a good laugh.
Right.
I've got a cool trilobite.
I forget where I am. Maybe you guys still believe in dinosaurs and evolution. If you.
Oh, I don't. But you know, I mean, at least we can be flat. That's cool. It's nice to agree on things, and I mean, that's great. Even among RH negs, we don't all agree on everything, and sometimes for us passionate RH negs, it can be very frustrating. But you know what? It's just nice actually to have someone to talk to, and I never would have imagined that all these people would be so interested in my hangout title. It's pretty funny. It's awesome. Not complaining. Hey Nina, I see you there.
Hats off to you with the title, for sure. Especially if you've drawn a big crowd with it. Certainly my attention.
That's awesome. I'm really glad. I can't even get the smile off my face, and to think that, I mean, I might have to find you and send you a message privately, because this is too awesome for me. I can't even find the words. I'll need more time for that.
I was going to say, I'm never quiet. So yeah, when I'm quiet, I'm either extremely upset or just fascinated. So yeah, I'm just trying to absorb everything at the moment. I hadn't really ever got into the flat earth versus, you know, globe theory in the last year or so. When it got really hot, I just had so many weird other things going on. I was like, you know, that'll sort itself out when the time is right. But I did notice when I was a very young child and I was flying, that exactly what you said about being in the plane. I never did see the curve. I just saw, you know, rows and rows and rows of just squared, flat, you know, earth. Like I never did see a curve. Like you said, I always thought that was very weird at a very young age. So I appreciate your knowledge. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll shoot. One thing I will say, and I think it was your point actually, Angel Hoosianuk. Have I said that right? Angel's Hoosianuk. Is that right? Something like that. Yeah, your point was to say that you saw the moon landings in what presumably was 69 or further to that. But that's the best place to start. If anybody thinks, oh no, these guys, they're nutters. You know, obviously we've been to the moon. We've seen that we're living on a globe. You know, well, we've got one photo that they call is a photo one that's from that mission. That series of moon landings is what gave us the proof we live on a globe. So that's the best place to start if you want to take what's on television. Me, I discount all of that, but that's a good place to start. Go and have a look at the NASA footage. I still do it now if I want a good laugh, because by today's standard, your man, what's your name, Douglas, you said you're good with images and videography, and you know a CGI when you see it. Go and have a critical look at the moon landing footage and tell me what you think.
I have. I don't necessarily believe that they did land there. I think the problems with just the Van Allen radiation belt, you know, I'm still kind of stumped on how they got past that. Right. However,
why do you think there's a Van Allen radiation belt? What makes you think there's a Van Allen belt? Why have you got this idea? It's another belief that you're holding on to there. You see?
Well, because we've measured it.
Have you? Have you measured it?
Science has.
Oh, wow. That's a lovely belief you've got there in science. Wonderful. They've measured it for you. Good to know. That's a lovely belief system.
Well, I mean, we can look at it. You know how I know that there's gravity? Because I can see it in the tides of the ocean.
Is that so?
Yeah.
So the moon's pulling on them?
Yeah.
Right. And you get this counteracting bubble on each side of the Earth, right?
That's correct.
So how come I endorse it? How come I get 3 tides a day? What's that all about?
I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about.
Centric system. It just has no explanation for some of this stuff. It just doesn't make any sense. But tides, if you want to hold that as proof of a ball, man, that's good for you. as I say, these are belief systems.
Well, what is the mechanism that causes the tides then?
Don't know.
Let's pretend that there's no gravity.
I don't know. That's a very good question. Well worth looking into.
When the Earth is rotating around this flat plane, or when the sun is rotating around this flat plane, when it goes to what I would call the southern hemisphere, does it speed up or slow down as it travels around in a bigger circle?
Well, that's a good question. I can only go by my own observations. So when I've been in the southern hemisphere or on the equator, it seems to go much faster. And that, when I say go, the light seems to recede much quicker. So I would base my first-hand experience of what the sun does, i.e. the evenings going away quicker. So I'll start again. Here in the UK, we get long, drawn-out evenings in our summer periods, and the converse would be true, but it isn't. You end up with the evenings just disappearing really quickly. So I would say that it seems like the sun's disappearing quicker. Have I measured it? Have I taken any accurate scientific readings? Absolutely not. So my first answer would stand, which is I don't know. You know, the same goes for the tides. I know there's electromagnetic forces at play in the Earth. I know that the sun and the moon affect things. And this is true for some of their experiments that they do. You've got the Foucault pendulum, which they absolutely use as proof of spin, yet it's interfered with by certain solar and lunar anomalies. Now, I can't ignore that. You know, I think they are the things that are having effect on the tides, but I don't know. And that's another thing that Flat Earth has given me, the ability to say, I don't know. Whereas often in the heliocentric entanglement that most people find themselves in, they don't have that ability. They only have the ability to choose between one option or the other. You know, it's either a big...
I understand where you're coming from.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what causes the tides, truthfully.
Yeah, all right. I accept that completely.
You know, and that's the best thing I can leave, the best note I can give anybody who's like, should I look at Flat Earth? Well, as a Flat Earther, I can say with confidence that I'm far happier in ignorance. I've got the blissful joy of a child because I can go, I don't know how that works. You know, what is it, 2 or 3 years ago? How does that work? Why is the sky blue?
Well, oxygen reflects blue light.
You're beating me to it. So you can type into the Google how and why, and you've got an answer. It doesn't matter what question you ask. You've got a question for this very hangout, right? Type that into Google, I guarantee they'll give you an answer, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right, well, I don't know the answer, and I can guarantee in terms of the hangout question, you don't have an answer. Not one of you can put hand on heart and give me a proper, true, provable, verified.
Can I give a theory? Can I step in this?
Sure.
Yeah, it's theory. But as you see, wood, when it is cold, it will compress, and when it's hot, it will swell, correct? The same thing would happen with the tides. With water, if you have the heat of the day of the sun, it will evaporate, so it comes lighter. Then when it's nighttime, as we look at the moon being cold, the sun being hot, then it will turn back to the liquid. And so there, it has to flow some way. So there's your tide, is the hot and the cold, the hot and the cold, which affects everything.
Yeah, I totally buy that.
Well, it would have to be pretty damn hot to expand to, you know, you look at some place like look in China, there's a,
water
you know,
is
they
a
have a
reflective.
10-foot tidal bore.
Well, wait a minute. Water reflects. Look at any surface. It reflects the sun, like the picture it's on my avatar. It is going to magnify even more with the sun because it reflects it, right? Like a magnifying glass. So when it's in the evening time, think about that. The coldness will automatically cool it. So then it's going to have to absorb back what it's already lifted up out from the sun. So it's got to go back down. Anything that comes back down into itself is going to make a ripple effect.
Okay, we got a high tide at midnight. How does that work?
Again, that's what I was saying. When it does that, the water is coming back down into itself. And so when you splash into the water, does it do?
Huh?
You got the ripple effect. The water's going to have to move if it, like, like rain. Okay, let's go in that theory. You have rain that's coming from above, and it comes down, and you're watching it in the water. What's it doing? It's rippling, and then all of a sudden you have the waves. It's the same thing, but in
But
a larger amount of a body of water.
yeah, but now you're making it sound more like a gravity thing. Like gravity is pulling the water up, and then as it heats up, and then it goes out. Well, that's what
Okay.
happens when it rains. You know,
If we're
the
talking about
raindrop
this,
comes in, it pushes up, and then backs out, and then waves go out.
yes, but I'm not saying gravity's doing that. I'm saying without oxygen, if I've seen this simulation where you have a bowling ball and you have a feather, and they throw it down, and of course the bowling ball was more dense, so it comes down faster than the feather. Take away the oxygen, and they both come down at the same time. So where does our oxygen actually come from? It comes from the water, and it comes from the trees.
That
So
that analogy with the bowling ball and feather, that has to do with it doesn't have to do with density. It's resistance to the air.
well,
Yeah, and again, that what you're citing, I don't necessarily take as evidence either. I mean, I've seen
no,
certain
it doesn't show
debunk.
evidence. Just saying, you're asking about gravity and density at the same time. I'm not trying to put those in the same category. I'm just giving you a relevance of, you're asking how we have tides. You're asking how
And
these
I think
things
it's
are.
spot on. What you're describing is pressure and density, and that's absolutely correct. I think you're right.
So hot and cold in any atmosphere, if you just like glass, you heat glass, you can mold it to any way you want, then you cool it, it stays in that uh, mold, correct? Okay, everybody froze. It's the
I
same
was following you.
Nobody's going to follow you with the glass. Nobody's prepared to stand by you on the glass making bit.
Well, I'm just kind of, some people can't see what the projection of things, just like a mirror. When people think of a mirror is very cold, but yet how do we get the reflection from a mirror? Well, I don't even know the material it's made from or anything like that. But when you look at how people are asking, how do we have tides? How do we have this, that, and the other? And you have to go back to heat, and you have to go with the cold. Whether when the moon's out or not out and it's dark, we know it's a lot chillier in the evening without those things. When the sun is up, it's hotter, and you can see the heat wave of anything when the sun is penetrating on the surface. I mean, whether I have a black vehicle or I have a white vehicle, I'm going to see it's more pronounced on my black vehicle than it is the white one, because the white one's reflecting it. But it's all in the same category of things. I'll shut up now. You guys discuss.
No,
I was picking up what you were putting down. I got it. I'm just quiet because I don't know anything on the subject, so I'm just observing.
if you caught me laughing, it was because I am loving this. I am so happy. I'm not laughing at, laughing, oh, you're so funny. No, I'm thrilled.
Dad has a question for Flat Earther. He wants to know how you would explain the analemma of the Earth.
Analemma of the Earth. Well,
Google
you guys are going to not like my theory of it. Okay, take the pyramids for example. And you see how the pyramids are. If we was to take our Earth, because no one knows if we're flat, has anybody been on the bottom of the Earth? I don't think so. Let's take it into that theoretical that instead of being a snow cone shape, that we are like a pyramid, but upside down, and that's flat surface. And I know that sounds weird too, but if I look at it into that, that's what I look at it. Because you have to look at the quote unquote four corners of the earth. I mean, that's in there for a reason, but everything that, just like this avatar, when it was first done, it was a square. Now we're looking at it in a circular pattern, like a tunnel vision. So if we want to stay in the tunnel vision that they're trying to keep us in, that's one way. But I think that we are like not a prism, but like we're square, we're flat. And just like if you was to take a glass of water, whether it be a circular glass or it be square glass, and you ask about the water, well, when you tilt that water is still going to be flat, but in a like a triangle shape, but it still contains its flatness. It's I can't explain it. Somebody else can pick up her, please.
Nathan, Nathan, Nathan. Angel, I'm impressed that you even knew what he was talking about. I don't know that word. So there you go.
I thought it meant something else. That's why I kept quiet. I thought it meant like being able to track the position of the sun, and you can kind of see it go through a figure of eight. So
That's exactly what I was talking about.
Is that what you mean?
Yes, sir.
What's your question about it?
Can you explain it?
From a plane.
What do you mean? Explain it.
Explain how that would work on a plane, if you can.
Yeah.
I don't really understand your question. I mean.
Okay, so Wolfie, what I can't remember his name. He's a YouTuber and he's all against flat Earth, and he really convincing arguments. And that was his last one, was the mechanism that they put on telescopes and cameras in order to track, say, stars or planets in the night sky. Is that the same thing, Doug?
No.
Oh, sorry. Well, better explain it.
It's the figure eight, basically.
I mean, if you can explain how that proves we're on a spinning ball flying.
Well, no, I'm just wondering. What he wants to know is how does that work on a flat plane?
Well, I mean, you could pick up an astrolabe and you can track all of the motion of the celestial bodies, and it works on like a disc shape. You can track all of these movements on a flat plane, and they've been doing it for thousands of years. I mean, in terms of describing those motions on flat planes, even the retrograde motions can be described with those devices. Globeheads would say that no, it's representing spherical motion. It's like, well, yeah, but it's being represented on this black disc. So, if I can represent it physically, literally in a model that I can hold in my hand, what's wrong with that as an explanation of how it would work above your head? I mean, this is a cop-out argument because I don't have a good explanation. I've not studied it in enough detail to give you an answer and say, this is how it would work on a flat plane. That's the honest truth. I don't have a good enough answer. All
right, I'll totally accept that.
But what I would say is that most arguments that come for the globe use exactly this tactic, which is to say, let's look up at the sky at these lights and what they do. And based on what they do, there'll be an explanation that says, based on what those lights do, you're living on a globe. And that's been done for centuries, thousands of years, if not. The perpetuation of this lie in terms of the globe model seems to be about 500 years old. That's how long the globe has been perpetrated as a cosmology, as a physical way of us existing. In reality, it's a mental construct, and it's backed up with evidences The ones that are observable are all sky-based. You know, the best deception of all is the ISS. You know, there's this light in the sky that you can go out and observe, and it ties up with a load of stuff that you can go and look on YouTube, not on YouTube, on like a 24-hour feed that they claim is running with live footage. Again, reference to Jeranism, go and watch his channel to watch him rip the ISS to shreds. But in reality, it's just another similar thing. It's a light in the sky. You know, these lights in the sky, regardless of whether they're tracked in a flat Earth cosmology or a globe Earth cosmology, have been tracked for a very, very long time. Not by me, but they are described equally well in both models. Now, there are people in the flat Earth that argue that the makeup of those lights in the sky and the way they are described and tracked is inaccurate, and we are highlighting some of those inaccuracies. Again, not my field of expertise. Shout out to Morgile. Go and look at Morgile's stuff. He's coined a phrase, the Morgile effect, for one of these quote-unquote heliocentric definitions of how our cosmology works and how the lights in the sky are moving around a spherical globe Earth and how they should appear. Well, this in and of itself is a whole other field of flat Earth that personally I don't think is necessary. And there's a few of my colleagues, shall we call them, that would also agree and say that the lights in the sky simply do not prove that we live on a spherical Earth, no matter which way you dice them. You know, you can point to the orbital motion of the moons around Saturn as much as you like, but the pool table example, you know, if every single ball on the pool table is spherical, does that mean that the pool table is also spherical? Well, of course not. Just because the moon appears to be spherical doesn't mean I'm standing on a sphere. Just because I can see moons going around Saturn or Jupiter or whatever planet you pick, just because they have retrograde motion, doesn't prove that the ground beneath my feet is curving away from me at 8 inches per mile squared. The reality of what I can actually observe is that it's flat, absolutely flat. In terms of the topology, if someone will say, well, we've got hills. No, overall, it's absolutely flat. And I like to lift a line from Neil deGrasse Tyson when he was describing Earth. He said that if you scaled Earth as a sphere to the size of a bowling ball and ran your hands all over the bowling ball, it would feel perfectly smooth. That is to say that the topology versus the size of the Earth in the heliocentric model is so insignificant in its elevation versus sea level that if it was the scale of a bowling ball, you wouldn't even notice it. And in reality, you can transpose that analogy into a flat plane and say that basically it's flat as a pancake everywhere you go. It's completely flat. Even if you account for the mountains, it's flat. And water, the best measuring tool we have for this, is flat, physically, observably, everything about it, the physics and nature of water tell us we're living on a flat plane. You know, that it's not stuck to some curves, and where they tell us it is, you can go out and measure and prove that it isn't.
Let me ask you this. What do you think of we're three-dimension? Then when we're sometimes if we are referring that the earth is flat, that would make it a two-dimension and we are the third dimension.
No, I mean, we definitely do have an up and a down. You know, we're not two-dimensional, i.e. flat, like we're on a piece of paper, like a two-dimensional drawing. Obviously, we have we do have topology.
Well, that's why people are trying to. That's where our brains go is automatically. You're trying to say we have a flat Earth. We have a flat Earth. That means that Earth would be like a piece of paper, and
sure. Well, if you imagine, I mean, I've said already that when you talk about gravity, you're talking about density and buoyancy. So if you go and get a whole series of different oils and waters and washing up liquids and all different liquids and just pour them into any tube, you'll see that they naturally separate out into different layers of densities. So that's a small scale experiment to explain how Earth actually is. And you can physically observe it on the large scale. So, you know, you've got the water of a certain density, and then you go further and further and down, things get more and more dense. You know, in reality, when you get to 12 kilometers, you can't go any deeper, so we are told. it's as dense as it can be, and you can't go any further with drilling equipment because it's so dense. And the counter of that is as you go up, you know, it gets more and more rarefied. The particles become more and more rarefied as you go up higher in altitude, to the point where if you're sending up a helium balloon and it's rising, defying gravity, as it's rising up, you know, proving the principles of density and buoyancy and defying gravity, as it rises up into the more rarefied air, the helium in the balloon will expand more and more and more and more in the balloon, because it's got less and less resistance against it from the rarefied particles higher up, until eventually it reaches the point where there's not enough resistance to keep the helium inside the balloon, and it pops and then returns back to Earth. So we have these density gradients throughout our Earth. And again, like with the guy with the camera, good times for all, Zachary Zabala, shout out to you, my friend, who's showing...
Turn the water on!
So yeah, you can replicate the density gradients that we experience in our everyday life on the massive scale that is our Earth in the small scale, in the same way as you can replicate things like the sun setting or the lack obscured, things like that. Anyway, guys, I'm gonna duck out because I'm gonna call her a colleague. Patricia Steers trying to call me. Don't know what she wants, but I'm gonna love and leave you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Who is the host, by the way?
It's me, Robin, and thank you so much for coming to troll my channel. That's awesome. Please come troll
Thank you.
anytime.
Yeah, I really enjoyed your information. I was fascinated by it. Thank you.
Please come back next week. I have more questions.
Pleasure.
Please convert my brother and father, please.
It'll never happen.
No, I don't want
Okay, don't convert them. Just get them to think in ways that I haven't been able to, please.
Yeah, that's a much better approach. I mean, this is the last thing I'll say, and then I will live and leave you. The only thing that I can say in a positive light for somebody who's like, yeah, the Earth isn't flat, is that as a flat earther, I've now got the ability to look at things for myself and be my own judge. In other words, I'm not going to be told what the Earth is by anybody. So, you know, that's a very empowering thing to know. Forget what shape it is. Just know that you can challenge anything. You don't have to believe in dinosaurs. You don't have to believe in the Earth being a globe. You don't have to believe that 9/11 was committed by a load of guys with box cutter knives. You don't have to believe anything. You just go out, have a look for yourself. There you go. I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much for having me.
Tell Patricia hey.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.